Okay, now you should be, after setting up your Git and GitHub repo, we're going to set up a Flask app for deployment. That means is that we're going to, if you should have Python installed, and we're going to install a library called Flask, and we're going to install several more libraries to prepare it for, on the cloud deployment on real production servers. So, and then we're going to wrap that code up into a Docker container, and then it will be ready to deploy on Google Cloud. So I'm going to go to VS Code. And now here on my VS Code, we're going to install what we call a virtual environment. It's going to help you manage Python libraries. So python-m pip install -- user, and then virtual env. Oh, I'm sorry, it's Python for me. I had the path changed. There we go. It could be Python 3 for you guys if you're on Mac. Just give it a little Google search there, fix it. So I already installed this library, but it will kind of show a loading bar when we install. It could be another example. So we're going to go ahead and make our virtual environment. A virtual environment is like, think of the Matrix. It's like having a code within code, or like Inception, where you're going to have a separate library where code will run in this virtual runtime environment. So when you run the code, it doesn't like damage your computer, basically, if you're doing anything crazy, but we're not doing anything too crazy here, so it's fine. So what I typed out is Python -m. We're telling Python to make a VEN, that stands for virtual environment. And then we can call it whatever we want. You could call it Apple, you could call it Nitney AI. We're just going to call it environment, ENV. All right. So as you see in the left, we've created a new folder. It has include lib for libraries, and then scripts. So these scripts and these libraries are what allows it to run in its own little world, its own code. And we're now going to enter that environment. So I'm going to type ls, and that listed out my directory. See, I have env.getignore, and then what we're going to do next is going to type evn, and then you're going to hit tab, and then you're going to type scripts. This is if you're on Windows, scripts, and then hit tab, and then activate tab. And what this does is that we're opening scripts up and we're running this activate script here, or this activate bat, I'm pretty sure. It's just a Windows script. And that what that did is run the virtual environment. Now we are in the virtual environment, as you can see, indicated by the parentheses right here at env. I'm going to zoom out again. Clear the terminal. All right. So next, we for Mac, you're going to do env bin /activate. It's different on Mac. That's all. But that will get you in your environment. So now that we're in our virtual environment, we are going to install our first library. And the way we do that is we're going to pip install Flask. And now here it's installing all these other libraries. So a lot of code, as you write some code and you use libraries from other things to build new functionality. Flask is composed of other engines like WorkSug and these templates called like Jenga templates, where you can kind of build templates with HTML. It's what Shopify uses in the back, and I think even WordPress might use it. But a lot of applications use Flask as basically a web server. That's what Flask is. So we're going to create our Flask app. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to zoom out so we can just see a little bit more. We're going to create a new file and type app.py. This icon at the top is a new file icon, and this is a new folder icon. And we're going to just hit enter, and we've created our Python script. From there, you want to keep your script. Oh, I just placed it in the wrong spot here. You want to keep your script not in the virtual environment, but outside of it in your repo. So this is kind of like your root level repo. You want to keep it there. So from Flask, import Flask app equals Flask _ name. There you go. So this line here is that I pip install the Flask library, and then I'm calling that library and then importing a class, and this class is going to instantiate an object app. Now, when I run the script, it calls the library and then creates this app in memory, this object, this app object. And then this object is what we're going to kind of mutate and affect in our lines of code. So this is what we call a declarative, I think it's called a decoration or declarative in Python. Double check me in the comments there, but we're going at app.route /route. And then we're going to pass a function under it, hello. And then 2 dots there, 2 colons, return hello world. All right, so that should look good. So what I did here is that I called the object app, and I'm saying create a route. This route is known as a kind of a root of like a home page, basically, the /route. So any website you go on to, you'll have something like, you know, we're going to do a local IP here, / there. So anytime you go to like New York Times or google.com, you're hitting an IP address, but the domain name is covering the IP address, so it's more human. So you type in google.com, you're going to an IP address, and you're hitting basically this root folder. That's what this is. And then we're going to finally do a run statement. So this is going to run our app. So we're going to say if name equals main colons app.run and debug equals true. All right. So what this is saying is that if this name is inside of like app here, if name was basically ran here, it's going to run the app pretty much. So we're going to go ahead and do Python app, and then you're going to hit tab to autofill. So python./app. So just rely on that, like you type in partial the name and then hit tab, and then it will autofill the rest, and then run the app. So now the Flask app is running locally. This 127.0.01 IP address HTTP is what we call a local server. So now on this local server, we have hello world here. You can see if I go ahead and move this here, kind of show you, you can edit this and then save it, and then it will restart here. I refresh, and then it's just world. So that's how we edit the web server on the left, and then we can see our changes. I have a second screen. This second screen is really helpful to kind of like make edits and then look to your left and make edits, things like that. But yeah, that's how you set up a local Flask app. Now, we need to prepare this Flask app. This is where if you write machine learning code or anything, right, you'll update your code here, and then you can test it on the app locally and make sure that it works, and then you can go ahead and deploy it, basically. So we're going to go ahead and try to configure the Flask app. So I'm going to clear the terminal again, and I'm going to pip install python-.env. All right. So we installed python.env, and we're going to go ahead and create a new file called .env. So this file is called environmental variables. This is where secret keys live for your database, for Stripe, your JTW secret tokens, whatever it may be. If it should not be shared with the public, it will live in this app. And your get_ignore file should have a section in here where it like ignores the just add it. There you go. It should ignore this file because you shouldn't post this up to your local repo, because then you're compromising a secret key that would allow hackers to get to a database. So it's really important you don't expose that. But just to show you how it works, we're going to do Flask debug. This is what we call a variable, and we set it to =1. And then we're going to import the variable here. Let me just zoom out again. So from here, we're going to from .env import a function called load.env, and then we're just going to do load.env. So we're just going to call that function right there. So let me just organize this here. Okay, so you should have your import statements and then load.env. So all this function does is look for a file like this and loads the variables into the app. So now we're going to config the app. So like I said, the app is an object, and we're going to config it debug equals os dot byron dot get flask debug. Okay. So we are missing a library here. So if we go to the top, we need to import OS. This library comes with Python. It's just a way for Python to access the file. So .env, it can just grab the variable here and then pass number 1 to the app. So I can indicate is that debug is on or not. I'm pretty sure we can then get rid of this here. And then we can test it. So if I run it now, debug is working, so debug is activated. Now if I set it to 0, which means off, we can run it again. There we go. There is no debug is activated. So what that means is if I change the Python code, the Flask app isn't going to check if any changes have been created there. So let me try that again here to show you that now debug is activated again, and there we go. All right, so now that works, we're going to implement what we call cross origins resource sharing, or CORS, and then we're going to implement gunicorn. So gunicorn is going to be used with Docker. It's going to get a little complicated here, but this is just what you need to do to set it up for deployment. So bear with me. So we're going to pip install Flask. Okay. And then we're going to pip install gunicorn. All right, so now we've installed two new libraries, gunicorn and CORS, but the only one we need to worry about is CORS. So we're going to do from Flask CORS. Now, this will allow you to share data when the front end requires APIs. So Flask app is used for like APIs and stuff sometimes, and people can kind of get data from the Flask app, but you need CORS to make sure that the data is following the correct protocols in regards to CORS. So if I kind of just give you a simple example of what it is, we can come here to the Mozilla site and you get a good explanation of what CORS is. All it does is that it checks the origin of the website and making sure that it's the same website, so they prevent like middleman attacks. You can just read more from their website. It's a very concise explanation. I think it's worth just going through once to get a good understanding of how it works. But basically, our Flask app is the server and front ends are like the client side. So for you to pass data from your AI model or machine learning model, that's what you need to get working there. All right, so we imported CORS, and now what that means is that we need to wrap our app, CORS app. So I imported a class called CORS, and then I wrapped the other object with that library. And now we should be able to prevent what we call like these CORS errors and stuff like that. All right, now we're going to go ahead and prepare our app for deployment. And what that means is that anytime you add a new library to your Flask app, if it's TensorFlow or Pandas or NumPy, whatever library you need to make your code work, make sure you pip freeze every time, because your list of libraries is what Google Cloud needs to run your code on deployment. So I pip freeze the requirements.txt. Here you can see I have all my libraries. I have Flask CORS, I have gunicorn, so that will be required on deployment. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a new file called YAML, app.yaml. A YAML file is just a set of instructions for the Google Cloud Engine to follow. And what it's just going to do basically at runtime when we deploy, it's going to set up a Python environment and then an entry point. What an entry point is just saying we're going to deploy a server, and then a port is going to be exposed, and that is like port 8080 or 80, and that is what lets your app become accessible by other applications and kind of like server to server communication, which is like a whole nother, learning about networking and port access. But you need this file so Google Cloud can expose your server to the internet. That is pretty much it. That's the short explanation. And then we're going to need to create a Docker file. Make sure you do D as in uppercase. If you do lowercase, the Docker file will not work. And we are going to then write in. You can copy from the blog because there's a lot of code writing here, but you have from Python 3.9 bookworm. So what this is that it's grabbing what's called a Docker image. It's just a server app that's been stripped down, and all it does is run Python code. You can have Ubuntu and Debian and other apps and things like that. And then we need to capture any logs. So if the server breaks, make sure you have this turned on so we can make sure that anything that goes wrong with the server is copied. And then the next section is env app_home. And then you can call this whatever you want. I just call it the backend here. It doesn't really matter. And then working directory and then copy. So what this is, it's going, since the Docker file is sitting right there, this Docker file, it's going to look at all the other files in here and copy them. So on the deployment, it's going to copy everything locally and then push it to the cloud. And there's another file that is really important that we need to make sure. So then when we run the Docker container, we need to run the, we need to install all the libraries. We need to load all the essential code you need to run. So you need pip. If you have pip installed, you're going to need that. It's a Python package manager. It's going to manage all your libraries on the installation. And then pip install, this requirements. All it's doing here, it's going to install each of these one by one onto Google, making sure you have everything. So if you have no requirements.txt, your code won't work and you'll get an error and say requirements.txt is missing. That's what it's talking about. All right, and then finally, we are going to have something called this command. Right, you can, since it's like a web server, like probably like running in like a Linux type environment, you're going to execute gunicorn. The port is going to be there, and then workers1, and then threads, and then timeout app to app. So that's what's going to happen. And then we have one step left before we deploy to Google Cloud. We're going to just control save that. We're going to do .docker ignore. And then we are going to add this list of ignore files. So when we deploy, the Docker file and the code is going to copy everything in this file. We don't want to copy the Docker file itself. We don't want to copy the README file. We don't want to copy the env file, like the virtual environment, because you're just going to push all this stuff, unnecessary stuff. So that's everything you need. So make sure you have cores installed for your Flask app. Make sure you have requirements.txt. And to deploy on Google Cloud, you'll need the Docker ignore and a Docker file and a YAML file. There is a specific link that I'll share with you in the description that kind of shows you how to deploy. So Flask app, Google Cloud. Here. So you'll follow the same instructions here that kind of explains like how to prepare your Flask app to deploy on Google Cloud. Essentially, you'll find the same exact code, but it works. It's pretty much it's the same thing. So yeah, Flask app, Google Cloud, Docker file. Let's see if we can find it. Here we go. Quick start. Deploy Python service to Google Cloud run. So here it is. This is kind of like the basic guide to getting it installed. And we'll go over these steps next, but essentially it's going to be the same thing here. We'll pretty much follow. So I'll leave that in the description if you want to read more of that too. So yeah, that's it. So the next step after this is going to be taking our app and deploying it on the cloud now.